For the entirety of my 7-year marriage to David, I operated under the crushing, suffocating delusion that we were a team. I believed in the sanctity of our partnership, the shared goals, the quiet mornings, and the deep, mutual respect that is supposed to be the bedrock of a life together. I was catastrophically wrong. The foundation of our relationship wasn't built on love, trust, or shared values. It was built on my willingness to submerge my identity, sacrifice my personal boundaries, and drain my own resources to support David's fragile ego and his family's bottomless, insatiable demands. I want you to imagine waking up one day and realizing that the person you share your bed with is a total stranger, someone who has been calculating your value in terms of assets and liquid capital. That is where my journey began. Today, I am going to take you through the slow, painful erosion of my marriage, the betrayal of my own grandmother's legacy, and the moment I finally realized that setting a bridge on fire is sometimes the only way to save yourself from the people trying to cross it. My husband, David, came from a family that viewed inheritance, savings, and personal assets not as individual property, but as a community pot that everyone had a right to dip into, provided they were loud, manipulative, and entitled enough to make a scene. His younger sister, Sarah, was the poster child for this dysfunction. Sarah was 32 years old, unemployed by her own choice, and firmly believed that the world owed her a lavish, high society lifestyle. I remember the early days, the subtle ways they tested my boundaries. It started small, a dinner here, alone there. They treated my bank account like an open ATM, and my patience like an endless renewable resource. For years, I was the one picking up the check at family dinners, paying for emergency repairs on Sarah's car, and helping cover her rent when she claimed her business ventures were in a slump. I tolerated it because I thought that was what being part of a family meant. I was merely enabling a parasite, and looking back, the guilt isn't just theirs. It's mine for allowing it. I was the one who taught them that I would always fold, that I would always give, and that my resources were theirs to claim. Then, the shift happened. My grandmother passed away. She was the matriarch of my side of the family, a woman of profound, legendary financial foresight. She worked as a public librarian for 40 years, living a quiet, modest life, while intelligently investing every spare cent in blue-chip stocks and downtown real estate. When her will was formally read by her attorney, I discovered she had left me a substantial, life-altering inheritance. A historic, fully paid-off Victorian home in a premium, highly coveted downtown district, and a liquid trust fund totaling exactly $800,000. This wasn't just money. It was the result of 40 years of self-sacrifice. It was a chance to finally achieve the deep-seated security I had been working toward my entire adult life. It was a way to ensure my future children would be cared for, and a way to honor the woman who had always been my champion. But the moment I shared this news with David, the air in our kitchen turned cold. The look on his face wasn't joy. It was the look of a vulture spotting prey. The betrayal didn't happen overnight. It was a siege. David and Sarah orchestrated a months-long campaign to convince me that my inheritance was a communal resource. The arguments were psychological masterpieces of manipulation. David would sit me down at 2 a.m., whispering about us, about investing in the family, and about how I was being selfish by keeping my own grandmother's legacy for myself. Sarah's role was the emotional martyr. She'd come over, tears in her eyes, talking about her dreams of a boutique, about how I was blocking her success. They played on my insecurities. They made me feel like the villain in my own story. They told me that marriage meant merging everything, that my boundary was a sign of a lack of commitment. I found myself questioning my own values. Am I being petty? Am I being ungenerous? That is the hallmark of a toxic relationship. They make you question your own sanity until you start to believe that their greed is actually your character flaw. The breaking point was the day I found them in my house, measuring the walls of my grandmother's Victorian home for Sarah's boutique racks. David had stolen my keys. The moment I saw them, standing in my sanctuary, planning the destruction of my history to build Sarah's ego-driven shop, something inside me shattered, but in the best way possible. It was the snap of a rubber band that had been stretched too far for too long. I stood in that hallway, looked at them, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to negotiate. I realized then that I wasn't married to a partner. I was married to an extortionist. I told David it was over, and I didn't look back. I had the files ready. I had the prenup ready. I had the security firm on speed dial. I had done my homework while they were busy spending money they didn't have. The legal battle was ugly, but it was short. When the reality of the ironclad prenup hit David and Sarah, their house of cards collapsed. David lost his job, his reputation, and his leverage. They thought I would cave. They thought I was the soft one. They were wrong. The weeks leading up to the final confrontation were pure psychological torture. I lived in a house that felt like a prison. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I saw David and Sarah huddled together, whispering. They would go silent the moment I entered, giving me looks of condescending pity. It was as if I were a child who didn't know what was good for me. They tried to frame me as mentally unstable. I overheard David on the phone with his mother, lamenting how unstable I had become since the inheritance, how I was being irrational and paranoid. They were laying the groundwork, trying to gaslight me into thinking my protective instincts were actually a mental breakdown. I had to play a part. I had to smile while they talked about wall colors for a shop I didn't want. I had to nod while they discussed our future that didn't include me having any agency over my own life. Inside, I was cold. I was calculating. I spent my days at work appearing normal, while my nights were spent reading legal statutes, learning the intricacies of real estate law, and documenting every single interaction. I became a master of the silent observation. I learned exactly how far they were willing to go. When David finally signed the renovation contract on my behalf, I didn't confront him. I printed the contract, attached it to my evidence file, and smiled. He thought he was winning, but he was actually pinning the noose around his own neck. What they failed to understand is that entitlement is a blinding force. It makes you reckless. They became so convinced of their own narrative that the woman who had always been the giver would eventually break, that they stopped paying attention to the real world. They didn't see the legal notifications piling up. They didn't see me speaking to bank managers. They didn't see me consulting with security experts. They were too busy playing their roles of the oppressed family who needed a handout. When the day finally came, the day I kicked them out, the look of shock on their faces was the most satisfying moment of my life. It wasn't the look of people who had been wronged. It was the look of people who had gambled everything on a sure thing and realized at the last second that the game was rigged. David's arrogance vanished, replaced by a stuttering, pathetic realization that his world was shrinking. Sarah, meanwhile, turned from a dreamer into a shrieking banshee, accusing me of all sorts of atrocities. It was all noise. It was all a desperate attempt to regain control over a situation that was firmly and irrevocably in my hands. The social consequences were the most interesting part. They tried to turn our friends against me, painting me as the cold-hearted witch who wouldn't help a sister in need. But the people who actually knew me, the people who saw how hard I worked and how much I valued my grandmother's memory, saw right through them. Slowly, one by one, our mutual friends started coming to me, confessing that they had seen the manipulation for years and were just waiting for me to wake up. It was a painful purge, but necessary. Every single morning now, when I wake up in that Victorian house, I touch the banister, I smell the coffee, and I appreciate the silence. No one is whispering about my money. No one is measuring my walls for their personal gain. I own my life. I own my history. I own my future. And if you are out there, listening to this, and you feel like you are being drained, stop. You are not a resource for the lazy or the entitled. You are the protagonist of your own life. Be the villain in their story if you have to, but never let them make you the victim in yours. Looking back, I don't regret the 7 years with David. I regret the version of myself that let it happen. I regret the person who thought that giving away parts of her soul was a fair price for keeping the peace. But I have forgiven myself. I have grown. I have reclaimed the space that was stolen from me. The Victorian house is more than just property. It is a monument to my own independence. Every renovation I did was a deliberate act of claiming my space, asserting my taste, and saying, "This is mine." When I decided to restore the original library, I felt like I was restoring myself. I kept the shelves full of the books my grandmother loved, and I filled the rest with books on law, finance, and philosophy. I am building an intellectual fortress around myself. David still tries to reach out sometimes, a stray text on a holiday, an email about reconciling. I delete them all. I don't hate him, but I have no room for him. Hate would imply he still holds some power over me. He doesn't. He is a ghost, a reminder of a lesson that cost me a great deal, but ultimately provided me with the greatest gift I could ever have, the truth about my own strength. Sarah is still out there, probably looking for the next person to feed on. I hope they are smarter than I was. I hope they see the signs before the walls start coming down. And as for me, I have a life to live. A life that is mine, entirely mine, and for the first time ever, absolutely perfectly enough. There is a specific kind of arrogance that comes with living off others. I watched it grow in Sarah like a cancer. It started with her believing she deserved the same quality of life as people who worked 80-hour weeks. Then it moved to her, believing that my hard-earned savings were actually surplus funds that I wasn't using correctly. By the end, she didn't even see the house as mine. She saw it as an unused resource that she had a moral obligation to optimize. That's the true danger of the entitled. They don't see themselves as thieves. They see themselves as managers of your resources. They believe they are doing you a favor by helping you use what you have. David was the architect of this delusion. He constantly validated Sarah's insanity because it allowed him to offload his own guilt for failing his sister. By forcing me to provide for her, he was essentially buying his own peace of mind with my bank account. He wasn't being a good brother, he was being a coward, and I was the one paying for his cowardice. I remember the day I realized that my own husband was actively working against my financial security. It was like the floor just opened up and swallowed me whole. But in that void, I found a new foundation. I found the part of me that refused to be managed, refused to be optimized, and refused to be exploited. One thing I would tell anyone in my position: don't underestimate the cost of your silence. Every time I said okay to a request I didn't want to fulfill, every time I bit my tongue when they disrespected my home, every time I reached for my checkbook to keep the peace, I was digging my own grave. I was training them to expect more. I was conditioning them to view me as a source of energy rather than a person with needs. Silence isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's just the sound of your own voice being erased. Reclaiming my voice was the most terrifying thing I have ever done. Speaking up to David for the first time, saying no to his demands, was a physical act. My hands shook, my voice cracked, I felt sick to my stomach. But when I got to the other side of that no, I realized something incredible. The world didn't end. They didn't hit me. They didn't destroy me. They just realized that I was no longer a resource they could exploit. That no was the shield that eventually saved me. Now I think about what I want to do next. I want to travel. I want to invest. I want to build a career that is entirely my own, on my own terms. I am no longer interested in being the support system for someone else's fragile ego. I am interested in building a life that is so vibrant, so secure, and so undeniably mine that no one, not a husband, not a sister-in-law, not anyone, will ever think they have the right to challenge it. I've learned that wealth is not just about the trust fund or the Victorian home. It's about the freedom to choose your own path. I've started a small foundation in my grandmother's name, dedicated to helping other women achieve financial literacy and independence. I want to take the lessons I learned through blood, sweat, and tears and turn them into a lifeline for others who are still trapped in the same delusion I once was. If I can help one person realize that they don't owe their life to someone else's greed, then every single second of that awful marriage was worth it. I don't look back at the divorce as a failure. I look at it as a rescue mission, a mission where I was both the victim and the hero. I rescued myself from a life of subservience, from a family of leeches, and from the version of myself that wasn't brave enough to stand tall. I am standing tall now. I am walking with my head held high, and for the first time, The path ahead is entirely, perfectly, and beautifully empty, waiting for me to decide where I want to go next. That is the true meaning of an inheritance. That is the true meaning of freedom, and I am never, ever going to take it for granted again. I often walk past the local bakery where David and I used to go on Sunday mornings. I see couples there talking, laughing, and sometimes I see the same patterns. The one-sided compromises, the power dynamics, the small, almost imperceptible erasures of self. I want to walk up to them and tell them to run. I want to tell them that love shouldn't feel like a sacrifice of your identity. But then I realize that they have to find their own way. They have to decide for themselves when the cost of staying becomes too high. All I can do is live my life as a testament to the fact that there is a better way. I am the proof that you can leave, you can start over, and you can win. I am the proof that the fire doesn't destroy you. It just burns away everything that wasn't strong enough to survive the truth. There is a profound stillness that comes after the chaos. For a long time, I was defined by my reaction to David, by my attempts to fix Sarah, and by my efforts to maintain a family that never wanted the best for me. Now I am defined only by my own actions. My mornings aren't filled with the dread of who I might have to appease today. They are filled with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I am safe. I have learned to cultivate friendships that are built on genuine care rather than transaction. I have learned that saying no to a manipulative request is saying yes to my own well-being. The Victorian house, once a source of conflict, has become my temple of serenity. I've spent months learning the history of the house, uncovering the stories of the families who lived there before me. It makes me realize that we are all just stewards of our own lives. We are responsible for what we protect and how we nurture it. I am protecting my peace. I am nurturing my ambitions. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel the need to justify any of it to anyone. The guilt is gone. The fear is gone. The constant gnawing anxiety that I wasn't doing enough to make everyone else happy. It's all gone. There is a lesson in all of this that applies to everyone, regardless of your bank account. The people who truly love you will never ask you to diminish yourself to make them comfortable. They will never ask you to hand over your future to solve their problems. If they do, they are not your family, and they are not your partners. They are obstacles. And obstacles are meant to be bypassed, moved, or left behind entirely. So here I am, standing on my own porch, looking out at a future that I finally own. I don't need a husband to validate me. I don't need a sister-in-law to approve of my choices. I have myself, and in the end, that has always been the only person I really needed. The bridge is burnt, the ashes have settled, and the road ahead is wide open. And trust me when I say, it has never looked more beautiful. My name is Elena. I am finally free, and I am just getting started. If you think that a legacy is just about what you leave in your bank account, you have it wrong. A legacy is the courage you leave in your own spirit. It is the boundary you drew when no one else would. It is the no that saved your life. My grandmother didn't just leave me a house. She left me the blueprint of how to stand for something. She taught me that a library isn't just for books. It's a sanctuary for the mind. She taught me that property is just stone and wood unless you put your own heart into the hearth. I have built my life around that lesson. And as I look out over the city skyline, I don't see the city as a map of places I used to go with David. I see it as a landscape of opportunity, a place where I can be anything I choose. The shadows of my past, the late-night arguments, the manipulative tears, the stolen keys. They have no power here. They are simply the dark soil from which my new life has grown. I am not the woman I was 7 years ago. I am stronger, I am wiser, and I am infinitely more free. If you are still waiting for someone else to give you permission to be happy, if you are waiting for them to finally see you or understand you, stop waiting. They never will. Your validation has to come from within. Your permission to be happy is something you have to grant yourself. I granted it to myself the moment I realized that my own life was worth more than the toxic piece they were selling me. I am the hero of this story, and the best part, the book is still being written, and this time I am holding the pen. My name is Elena, this is my truth, and I have never, ever felt more alive.